Welcome to FO Talks. With me is Saya Kiba. She is an associate professor at Kobe City University of Foreign Studies. Today, we're going to be talking about a very important country in Southeast Asia. I'm referring to the Philippines. The country plays an important role, and Japan is a major partner of Philippines. Saya, can you tell us, are Japan and the Philippines closer than ever?
Yes, everybody says so. And when actually 2 years ago, when our former Prime Minister Fumio Kishida visited the Philippines, he said that the two countries are now, uh, experienced the golden age. And this year, when Prime Minister Ishiba of Japan visited Manila, President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos of the Philippines also mentioned the same phrase that we are in the golden age.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think the Philippines and Japan have gotten closer? And a lot of Filipinos also say that Japan is their most trusted and closest ally in Asia. That's a very big label for Japan to carry forward. Why do you think this has happened?
Okay, there are several reasons, and may I go back to the post-war period and the bilateral relations between the Philippines and Japan. So after the World War II, of course, the Japan did some, gave tremendous damage to the Philippines during our invasion to the Philippines and the other Southeast Asian countries. And in 1970s, when our governmental repatriation, the war repatriation is almost over, and then gradually when the Japanese enterprises set business enterprises in the Philippines and then started their business there, and there are still a lot of anti-Japanese movement or anti-Japanese sentiment because everybody remember that war, and then the Japanese came back as a business person. So just like Thailand and Indonesia and the other Southeast Asian countries, there are some anti-Japanese sentiment in 1970s. But after that, in these 50 years in the past, there are a lot of so-called people-to-people exchange or people-to-people connectivity between the Philippines and Japan. That is very particular to the Philippines from the perspective of Japanese. Okay? So the Japanese business persons and Japanese business community in the Philippines, they had sincere work, and then they try to be very productive and to be very honest, unlike the Imperial Japan. And it is quite sensitive, but the Filipino ladies, Filipino women, and Japanese business person met through the entertainment business, I mean the Philippine pubs and the nightclubs. And then gradually those, just an ordinary citizenship, just an ordinary people-to-people exchange and interaction gradually changed the attitude of the Filipinos towards Japanese citizens, and they gradually understand that the Japanese are not very brutal, unlike the World War II period, and then the Japanese business person are not the simple economic animal, but an honest person and just a human being. So those kind of the people's to people connectivity and the mobility, people's mobility, really changed our mutual understanding. And after that, in 1980s, 1990s, still the Filipino entertainers, they came to the Filipinos came to Japan, and then they made a family in Japan. They got married in Japan, and they are very rooted in Japanese society. And later, the Filipino student, came to Japan, and then after the free trade agreement between the Japan and the Philippines were ratified in 2008, then the nurses and caregivers from the Philippines, they come to Japan, and then they contribute a lot in our aging society. And nowadays, the Japanese, younger Japanese, they prefer to go to the Philippines. It started in 2000, year 2000, around year 2000, through the English education. Because the Filipinos speaks really good English, right? And then their English education, particularly the teachers are professional. So many youngsters, they go to the Philippines for English learning. and there are a lot of like online English schools and Skype English kind of things. And then most of my young students really respect the English proficiency of the Filipinos. And then the Filipinos also love our the Japanese public safety, public order, strong law enforcement, and the cleanliness. So when you experience their countries through the people to people interaction, and then they gradually understand the countries, and then that is how the mutual trust was created between the two countries.
Wow, I think how Japan and Philippines have gotten closer, especially after World War II, is a brilliant case study on how two countries can become connected and can grow closer to each other just by people. I mean, keeping the diplomacy aside, keeping government aside, how people can come together and form an alliance. I think that's really brilliant, and I'm sure a lot of the other countries can learn that from Japan and Philippines. But I want to talk about the elephant in the room, or should I call them the elephant in the seas? I'm talking about China. They have been getting aggressive, more so towards the Philippines, especially in the West Philippine Sea. Very recently, this month, a video has gone viral. A Chinese Coast Guard ship rammed into a PLA, or a People's Liberation Army Navy ship, while they were chasing a Filipino Coast Guard boat. So clearly, I mean, it was two Chinese ships colliding with each other while they were trying to intercept a Filipino boat. Luckily, there was no serious injuries or a flare up in the conflict. But it is true that China does poke the Philippines quite a bit. They try to bully them around. How do you think Japan is seeing this, and what can Japan do in terms of helping the Philippines, if not diplomatically, at least militarily?
Well, so the Japan and the Philippines shares the sense of value, the freedom and rules of law in the ocean. So we share the same value, but we cannot say that we have the like kind of same enemy. Okay, so officially speaking, well, we have strengthened our security cooperation between the two countries. But officially speaking, the Japan tried to expand or enhance the maritime security capacity of the Philippines, particularly the ISR, the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. Okay, and then that is the best reason why we extended the security cooperation to the Philippines in the past 10 years. Right? The significant or the symbolic case is the Japan's first arms export was to the Philippines, and until now, this is the only case since we relaxed the conditions for the arms export in 2014. Okay, so in the 10 years, there is only one case, and that's the Philippines. So the Japan provided the mobile air surveillance radio system this year, last year, and then also before that, in 2013, Japan provided the Philippines with the advanced air surveillance radio system. Okay, so that is it's an expensive one. It's not for free, and the Philippine government, the Philippine armed forces decided to buy those systems. Okay, but okay, if you go back to our history, Japan tried to be very careful in our arms export, and we still maintain three principles for the arms export, and we cannot export the lethal equipment, for example. Okay, so the radar system is fine; it's not lethal, but for example, we cannot provide any destroyers or the fighters, okay, because it's lethal. Well, some joint development cases is allowed, but still, there is a very strong limitation in exporting the lethal equipment. So we have to be very careful. So even though we provided some military equipment to the Philippines, it is not for not to be encounter some particular country, but it is for the capacity building of the Philippines. So we cannot say that the Japan and the Philippines is jointly encounter the Philippines in the West Philippine Sea or the South China Sea. Okay. But in reality, that's true. As you mentioned, our Coast Guard ship is actually utilized to patrol the Filipino vessels in the disputed water. That one, the Coast Guard ships, that is not the military equipment. Okay, so so we have to be very very careful, in Japanese bureaucracy. Okay, officially speaking, the Coast Guard assistance or our Coast Guard assistance, giving the patrol vessels to the Philippine Coast Guard, is not a military or security assistance. It's an ODA or official development assistance, because the Philippine Coast Guard is a civilian agency, not that part of the Navy. Okay? So officially speaking, our government gave the patrol vessels to the Philippines for the purpose of maritime law enforcement, such as search and rescue, illegal fishing, the patrol against illegal fishing. So that is the main purposes. But as you mentioned, that patrol vessels are actually utilized for the patrol activities in Scarborough Shoal, and actually they have they are involved in the crash, or they are involved in the dangerous and destructive maneuver from the Philippines, from the China side.
And of course, Japan is being very careful in what they're giving to the Philippines, but
Yeah.
the support is still there.
Mhm.
And you can you can almost say that the Philippines has given that back, because let's look at Balikatan 2025. It's an annual exercise that the Philippines conducts. It's mostly involving the US, but
Mhm.
this time Japan was invited. Japan played a big part in it. Clearly, the Philippines trust Japan, and they see that this relationship is going to get stronger. What do you think about maybe Manila and Tokyo increasing their bilateral or maybe multilateral military exercises? Because that does not mean it's a business transaction; it's more of cooperation. Do you think that is going to increase over the years?
So bilateral exercises and also the mutual visit between the Philippine armed forces and the self-defense forces of Japan is rapidly increased. Okay? In 2024, the second Japan-Philippine Foreign and Defense Ministerial meeting, or 2+2, was conducted, and there the two countries signed the Reciprocal Access Agreement, or RAA. It is similar to the Visiting Force Agreement. So when the armed forces of the Philippines visit the Japan, and there is a lot of exception for the QI, for the quarantine or immigration, and then there are it makes the mutual visit more easier and accessible. So that is why it is accelerated, and that is why in the Balikatan exercise this year, the Japan self-defense forces could join as as a participant, not as an observer.
I want to now zoom out and maybe look at India. So India has very good relations with Japan, and almost, I mean, many in India still speak very fondly and still really remember late Honorable Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. He
Mm.
made a really big impact on India, and he really solidified India-Japan relations. It's he put it on a platform where it's only been upwards and growing. And India has also started really expanding its influence and relations in Southeast Asia. The Philippines is a big part of it. Manila has purchased BrahMos missiles from New Delhi. They are, and recently, President Marcos was here. He was in India. He visited New Delhi. It was his first state visit. So clearly, the ties are growing. Do you think India can play a role where it can make this Japan Philippines bilateral alliance into a dependable and strong trilateral alliance?
Well, in track two level, there are already some discussion among the think tankers or among the researchers, academia, how to set up such a kind of trilateral, the India, Philippines, and Japan, but not yet. No, it's not yet institutionalized. Well, it is possible. So what was good for the Abe administration was to bring he brought the India to Indo-Pacific, and then he already was already aware the capacity, the maritime, particularly the maritime capacity of India, and then the India's Prime Minister Modi's strong commitment to ASEAN member states. So that was very good. And well, so earlier I explained the bureaucratic and then pacifist kind of attitude of the Japanese policy, even for the security cooperation or the arms export. But India has no, no sense, no taboo in that sense, right? So the India can provide a lot of maritime capacity building for the Philippines and the other Southeast Asian countries, particularly the MDA, the Maritime Domain Awareness, and also they can provide a lot of arms export, the military equipments, the then there's nothing sensitive in political sense. And also the India also provide a lot of multilateral military exercises in the region.
Saya, I want to come back to your time in the Philippines. You were there for a while and you had interactions with all kinds of people in the country. How were those interactions like? How did ordinary Filipinos feel about Japan, and what was your bonding factor with people over there?
Well, okay, so with let me start with my personal experience. I decided to study in the University of the Philippines when I was a high school student in Japan. And what was attractive for me was the such a freedom of speech, and everybody is very politically encouraged, very high voting rate, voting turnout. So voters turnout of the Philippines is almost more than 80%, and unlike Japan, okay, so those kind of things, and then people in the Philippines joyfully discuss the politics, and so that kind of things. So in bilateral bilateral and high level exchange of the political leadership, they always repeat the same phrase. The Philippines and Japan share the same value, that is freedom and rule of law. But I sense that already, even before such a high level exchange started, because I sensed when I was in the Philippines, when I studied and worked in the Philippines, I sensed that we share the same value. Okay? So now for the Filipinos, Japan is the best tourist destination. And of course, what they like Japan is they want to have some experience in Japan, okay? And they love the Japanese institutions and they love the Japanese governance. So in the past, the Japan was just a venue to come for the routine work as a trainers or the interns, and then they just earn the Japanese yen and then sent back to the Philippines. So that was, Japan is such a place, earning. The earning is the main purpose, but now it's changing. So the Filipinos are gradually understanding our governance and the institutions, strong institutions, and then they try to have the business experience or academics experience in this country. So that is very good, and then I believe that the Filipinos has the strongest sense feeling the value of the Japanese institutional strongness.
How do you then think ties are going to be going forward? I mean, you've already spoken about the people to people ties and how they have really grown since World War II. But in your personal opinion and what you've seen in the Philippines,
Mhm.
what do you think is going to be the future for Japan and Filipino relations?
So, first of all, we have to be aware that it's a quite young country. The Philippines is a quite young country, so the average age is 25 or something. So it's amazing, It's the voters and the citizens are very young, and so we have to refresh, the Japanese side. We have to refresh our image to the Philippines. Okay, I'm 45 years old now, and then above me, above my generation, the Philippines were still the developing countries. It was the part of the third world. Okay, and then they strongly believe that the Japan is a donor and the Philippines was a recipient. But nowadays, my students' generation, the teenagers, they believe that the Philippines is a developed country, and then they have, they speak really good English, right? Well, for them, the Filipinos are teacher. So we have to change our, the mindset, our mindset towards Southeast Asia. We have to review how we can work with them, and probably what I feel in the past few years is the Philippines and Japan can provide probably the can provide jointly provide the public goods or bring the public goods to the other countries. That is, I think that is similar to the India-Japan relations. Okay, so India is not, the recipient. The India is actually the provider of the public goods to the world, and then that is why in among the Quad countries, the U.S., Australia, India, and Japan, we discuss how to provide the vaccines, how to be a hub of the disaster response, or that kind of things, right? So the Philippines is already in that level. So probably we can discuss how the two countries can have a spillover effect to the other countries. The good example is that a few years ago, the Japanese government provided disaster relief equipment to the Philippine Army, and it is for the engineering units. And then it is mainly for the humanitarian assistance and disaster relief activities in the Philippines. And that equipment was used for the earthquake relief activities in Turkey by the Philippine Army when they were deployed there. So, and then the Philippine government is now very interested in the South-South cooperation, provides them to be a donor or to be post a recipient country. Okay, probably that kind of things it's very important to discuss. Okay, when you review the Myanmar earthquake this year in April, the Myanmar government tried to refuse the intervention from the large power, external power, and they try to accept. They try to prioritize the relief from the neighboring ASEAN countries. That kind of regional cooperation will be more frequent in future, and then probably we can discuss how the Japan and ASEAN or Japan and the Philippines can work together for the third country.
I want to thank you, Saya, for this insightful conversation and your personal anecdotes of what your life was like in the Philippines and your experience with the Filipinos. Thank you very much for joining us at Fair Observer.
Thank you very much.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.